Hello, welcome to the May 31st, 2024 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed with the number of questions, but realize that we will go through all the questions chronologically as they are asked. If you do not see an immediate response to a question, if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. We'll go through them again chronologically. We should have an index of all the topics covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field with timestamps. It is the last live stream of the month, so we will be having our Zoom meetup starting in about 2 hours. I'll go ahead and post the link. So if you haven't done a Zoom social meetup, it's basically a great way to meet other people that are on the live streams. And if you, so with the topics we'll see the topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top, but if you want to search for topics in previous live streams, you can go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan for creating that website. We also had two people that serve as moderators, Agent K and Jazz Dude, so we'll give special thanks to them. They're not Steinberg employees. They just make it, they just do it out of the goodness of heart to make it a better community. And we'll give a special kudos to Jazz Dude for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products. And I'm the host today. I'm presenting from outside Washington, D.C. in Alexandria, Virginia. Sorry, I'm fighting a little bit of a cold today. So if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. Okay, first question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to quickly add quick controls and change the combined balance panner in the mixer window like you would say adding inserts across multiple channels? Thanks so much. Okay, so if you want to add quick controls for a particular plugin parameter or instrument, all you would need to do is kind of right click, and a lot of the parameters we could just add to your quick controls list. So you could just about on any of the parameters, you could right click and you could just do pickup. If you're using the MIDI remote, you could just pick up for MIDI remote mapping and move the parameter. So, but most parameters you could just right click and assign their quick controls. Also, if you wanted to look at a particular plugin, you can see the default quick controls. If you click on the QC button here, you could define the default quick controls buttons directly here for this particular setup. So that way you could assign them to your 8 quick controls. All right, second part of the question was, is there a way to change the combined balance panner in the mixer window? I guess doing it multiple times. So this doesn't work with Q-Link, so you're gonna have to do this kind of individually, where you could right click and switch between stereo combined panner and stereo balance panner. If you want the opposite for the default panning, if you go to preferences, I think it's under VST, we could set the default stereo panner mode. So if you want it to be balance, if you want it to be combined, that way as you add stereo tracks, you can automatically be set for the particular panner you want. All right, so you see Captain Energy Music says, hey Greg, I hope you're doing fantastic. So I'm doing great, thanks for asking. Says he actually has a question. Spectral Layers 11 is coming. I already bought it, but if I buy it again, can I get the upgrade free? Dom says buy now to save money, but I was wondering if it worked if I bought the upgrade and I already owned the upgrade. Know what I mean? Just to save the $32. So I'm not sure if you have already purchased the Spectral Layers 11 upgrade. So if you have Spectral Layers 10 or Spectral Layers 11, that works with Steinberg licensing, so you could run it on up to 3 different computers. If you just bought Spectral Layers 10 within the current Pro Audio promotion, what you could do is you're eligible for the grace period update. So you could, so that would give you a free update. So I'm not sure if you need to buy a separate license, because each license you could run on 3 separate computers. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding Captain Energy Music. All right, wonderful to see Tim K checking in from Zeist in the Netherlands. All right, Braxel asks, hi Greg, when you bring up the chord pad editor and circle fifths wheel to the right of it, if you switch to major chords, pads do not change with the 1 chords, etc. Seems to be stuck on minor. All right, so it's just okay. So we'll come over here to the chord pads. Okay, I'll just add an instrument track. Okay. So we'll come over here to our circle of fifths. All right, so we can see that this allows us to switch between major and minor. It's not necessarily going to change the chord pads from major to minor, but if we wanted, you know, like let's say we're currently in C minor, so if I have the C major circle of fifths, it's probably not as applicable as if I'm in C minor to change the C minor circle of fifths to be in the minor key. Let me just reread the question. So yeah, so this would just allow you to select the chords, but it's not going to automatically update and transpose this from major to minor within the chord pads. So this just shows you the available chords that you could select. So I can say, okay, I want this particular chord. Then we could just come over here. So, but it's, you know, switching this from major to minor isn't going to necessarily transpose the chord pads for you. It just allows you to select more appropriate chord pad choices, chords for the chord pads. All right, sorry, the chat is acting up on me. All right, so you see from Yazian just says, I would like to see in Spectral Layers 11 a remix button to remix any song / sorry, no way. Sorry, my chat field is on a separate window and it's kind of. Okay, so Yazian just asked again, I would like to see in Spectral Layers 11 a remix button to remix any song, a radio edit or club mix any genre. Yeah, so I mean, I don't think that we would expect that in a Spectral editor or remixer, just to say, okay, turn this into a club mix versus a pop mix versus a pop country. So I think that would still be kind of handled in the DAW. All right, so we have Eric Sampson from Paris as an enhancement request. Could the main section in the control room, sorry, can the main section in the control room expand in the unused spare space above when all the sections above are not expanded? All right, so let's take a look at a control room. So depending on what you have, so if these aren't expanded, and let's say I don't have these, that, you know, these will kind of pop up, but sometimes I think you might still have spare space because this may not rise because it, you know, it could be set to a fixed space. And as you get to inserts, but I'll pass along this suggestion. All right, Eric Sampson asks, is there a way to move all inserts on a track up or down? All right, so let's come over here quickly. So we'll come over here to the mix console. Let's look at our inserts. So say if I wanted to add an insert here, one thing that you might be able to do, I don't think that there's a way to do this, but often when you want to move something up or down, it could be because you want to place another effect. So let's say if I wanted to place another plugin here at the top, I'm going to move this to the top. And as we do that, that moved everything down. So if we undo that, and we can hit Alt or Option plus Z. If I move this, let's say on top of the ping pong delay, that we could just place that in the middle. Or if I move this to the top spot, all those plugins would move down. So if you needed to get rid of that plugin, you could just remove that and leave an empty space if needed. But often I think you'd be doing that because you'd want to kind of reorder the plugins. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so you see Eric Sampson says, what are those SysEx data tracks that are sometimes added by some VSTi? Can we safely remove them? So depending on the instrument, it could be system exclusive. So it could be just a way to recall a particular setting. It's often used primarily more with hardware instruments, and sometimes it can also be carried over with standard MIDI files. But generally, it's pretty, you could try to mute the track and see if you notice any playback differences. But a SysEx data would often load up a particular collection of sounds or a state of the hardware instrument. That's generally what SysEx files are for. All right, so we see Daniel says, yo, OG, what was up? How was Boston? Kick any robots? Internet is missed you. So you had a great trip to Boston. Got to hang out with my friend on the Dorico side, John Barron. So it's wonderful to see him. And we had a great meeting at Berklee College of Music. All right, so we see Professor WM says something new about the denormalization of floating points. So I kind of passed it along, but I haven't gotten an answer yet on it. Wonderful to see Soren in Västerås in Sweden. Thanks for joining us. Always wonderful to see Jazz Dude. We see Terry Dean on. We have Jan from Cubase Index. Great to see Terry Dean. All right, we see Parabot 2 on. All right, we see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. All right, we see Daniela Tocan from Bochum, Germany, using Cubase and Nuendo 12. Terry Dean's checking in from Holland. All right, Parabot 2 just says, hi Greg, do you mind showing how to set up your mix bus and what you prefer to add to that bus? Compression type, etc. for rock music. All right, so let's take a look. I'll open up a rock track. A lot of times I find that people are, will try to mix into plugins. I personally Not a huge fan of that, but if I wanted to take kind of a rock track here, you know, I would maybe come over here to dynamics, and you know, there's even like the envelope shaper. A lot of people would use this mainly for like a particular drum, but I think you can get like great results out of this if you want more attack. So you could have it kind of be super tight if you wanted to. So even though it's kind of used for other sources, it's still a great plugin to use. Squasher is kind of an up-down compressor. So if you wanted to come here, so this could be kind of very aggressive compression. If you needed to, for EQ, I would probably use like frequency, because this could be very kind of surgical. So let's say I want to come to here. Let's make this shelf. So if I were to bypass, and let's say let's maybe do like a little bit of imager, like a multi-band imager, I would come over here. And let's just, so if I was now to take all those tracks, and we'll bypass this plug-in chain. I think that when you do that for someone's mix, they would give you money, and that's a good thing. So something like that, try some of the different processes, and I think, you know, there's no right or wrong answer, but you know, everything could work, and it could really be dependent upon the actual tracks themselves. All right, so we have Tolis checking in from Greece. Thanks for joining us today. All right, Martin asks, hi Greg, please can you try playing back some chords on your Cubase 13 on Mac with 2 different poly instruments while using some chords in a chord track added by using the chord pads. All right, so let me just open up project here. Okay. Okay, so I have my chord pads here. Okay. So please play back some chords on your Cubase 13 on Mac with 2 different poly instruments while using the same chords in a chord track. All right, so let's say I have Pad Shop and this Rhodes. So if I have my chord track here, and I'm going to choose to use monitor tracks, so we will come over and I'll place these tracks into monitor. And now as we play back, we should hear both the Rhodes and the Pad Shop. Make sure. So looks like we could, so these are two polyphonic instruments. And then as we're playing, these are playing back from the chord. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to accomplish, Martin. All right, so it says playback some chords, Cubase 13 and Mac with two different poly instruments while using some chords in a chord track, adding just by using a chord pad. So let's say if I want to drag this over, so as we play, so let me know if that's kind of what you want to accomplish, Martin, if that makes sense, or if I'm misunderstanding. All right, so we have Apostolos Ganitas just saying, hi, Greg. Thanks for joining us today. All right, David King says, hey, all, made it completely by accident after 4 years. Well, welcome to live stream. All right, so you see Martin just saying, my Cubase 13 on Windows playing back the whole sequence from start while the first polyphonic instrument is selected, then selecting the second polyphonic instrument, stopping and playing back right from the start, causing my Cubase 13 to trigger initially the wrong unselected instrument or silence if a first instrument was not involved. For the first chord, with the following chords will trigger the selected instrument. Yeah, so let me know if that makes sense, what I did, Martin, if you just let me know. All right, Alessandro Bras asks, how can someone get a Cubase certification, like a test to get qualification in Cubase? So I don't think that there's an official certification course. I think you could reach out to Steinberg and become a certified trainer, but there's no official curriculum because by the time we had a curriculum, the software would be, it changes so quickly. So, but I don't think that there's an official like certification. All right, wonderful to see Michael Pierce from a Drizzly, UK. All right, Tim Weinheimer just asked, when using Spectral Layers 10 Pro in the lower zone, I unmix a song. Can't see where the unmixed tracks are, thanks. Okay. So let's go ahead. Okay, so we'll open up this project here. I've done unmixing already. Okay, so once we've done in the lower zone here, so we could see the different, often what I do is if we make this taller, then we could see the different components. So say if we're listening to our project here, then we could just so once you do, if you go to unmix and we choose unmix song, then at that point they will show up here under the layers menu. So if you have that closed, you may not see it, but just make sure you're there, and you may just have to kind of bring it up Or if you click on this, that could take it to an external window. Then you go to your layers menu. You can see it there, or tuck it back into the lower zone. And you could also, if you just see a couple, like just one layer here, if you just use your mouse scroll wheel, you can navigate between the different unmixed layers right there. All right, we have a question. What is the difference between Cubase and Nuendo? So Nuendo is going to have all the features that Cubase has, but it's going to have very specialized tools. It's going to have some more Dolby Atmos work. It's functionality of like importing ADMs, having multiple beds. It's going to have game audio workflows, especially if you're working with Audio Kinetic Wise. It's also going to have full ADR functionality. It's going to have reconforming, some additional sound design plugins. So a lot of very kind of specialized tasks for game audio, advanced audio production, and post-production. But all the Cubase features are in Nuendo. All right, wonderful to see Uno Memento checking in from Finland. All right, we have a question. It says from, I think it's Robbie M. Becky. Greg, a friend asked me recently, I didn't know what to tell him. When recording acoustic guitars, can you automatically quantize the input signal to 16th note? So there's no automatic input quantization for audio. You can do it for MIDI, but it would have to be recorded and then quantized after the fact. There's no kind of auto quantize for audio. All right, so we see Michael Pierce says, ooh, when is Spectral Layers 11 due? Might do that upgrade while I have a chance. Grace period. So it's a good time if you want to take advantage of the grace period. There's going to be I think Dom is doing a live stream on June 12th. So you could check out that, and it may be shipping shortly after that. So if you want to take advantage and jump up to Spectral Layers 10, which would give you the grace period, it's a good time to do that. All right, so we see from Quellen, hey Greg, since I updated on Cubase 13 Pro by dragging loops from the right side of music mode, they don't adapt to the BOM. If the song I need to change in BOM control plus P manually, the same loops on Cubase 12 was adapting automatically in music mode with no writing the BPM on the pool. Okay. So I think you're going to be one mouse click away from happiness. All right, so let's say my tempo here is set to 100 beats a minute. We go to the MediaBay, and we go to Audition Loops. All right, so you're going to have one little button here that will say Align Beats to Project. So if that is not turned on, I drop this in. Right, so let's do it with, find like a drum loop, make it. All right, so right now, when we have this button turned off, we can see that it's going to play back at the original tempo. When this is turned on, it's going to slow down to the project tempo. So if I change my project tempo here to 80 beats a minute, that's just going to slow down. Or if I change my project tempo here to 120, and we go to Audition. So whatever tempo we have here, because this button is turned on, it's going to play. So if I change my tempo here, the loop is playing back at the same tempo. So with this turned on, and I drag the loop into the project, it's then automatically placed into musical mode. If I take another loop, and that's turned off, So just make sure that you have the align beats to the project window, and then that should automatically place it into musical mode. You could also just kind of take the different elements and enable or disable musical mode right there as well. But make sure you just have that button on, and I think that will fix your problem for you. Great. All right, so we have Karsten Lau checking in from Denmark. Thanks for joining us. All right, I'm going to post the Zoom link one more time. I'll try to do that every half hour or so. Okay, so we see from Daniela, says, will Spectral Layers have VST support and not just a proprietary ASA? So it's probably going to be ARA. So an ARA isn't proprietary, so it's an open standard. And realize that when you're doing stuff between like an audio editing environment, you know, VST isn't as well suited. Like the editing when you're kind of doing edits and you want those to transfer back and forth between the DAW and the editing environment, that's when ARA is more applicable of a tool. And once again, ARA isn't proprietary, so it's an open standard that just about all the DAW support. All right, so we see David King says Spectral Layers is his favorite tool at the moment. Actually, unmixing a track is like taking stereos apart as a kid to figure out how to put them back together again. Shows the real discipline of Queen and Roxette. Yeah, it's really interesting. All right, so we see Terry Dean switch to Nuendo 13. We see Jason Sykes from South Shields, England. All right, so DL White just says, hi Greg from Fort Worth. I have 3 string instrument tracks using HALion instances. How do I combine them to use one instance of HALion and assign the instruments in the HALion editor to 3 MIDI tracks? Okay, so if I wanted to come here, let's add an instrument track. So I'll just add a HALion Sonic here. Okay, so let's come over to Iconica Sketch. All right, so say we have violin 1, viola, and we'll add cello. All right, so when I play my HALion Sonic here, we should just hear so we're just seeing our violin 1 play. So if we want to play to 3 different string sounds, what I'm going to do now is where I have the instrument track selected is we're going to add 2 MIDI tracks, and we already have MIDI channel 1, so I'm going to start this at MIDI channel 2, and we'll add 2. So this will be violin when I come here, viola, and now when I'm here, cello. So once you add the instrument track, add 2 more MIDI tracks. There's MIDI tracks increment when you're able to add, to select the MIDI channel, select, since we already have channel 1, and then as we would select our different tracks, we could see the instruments reflected right here. So add 2 MIDI tracks on MIDI channel 1, 2, and 3. This will assume the MIDI output port from this instrument and apply that same output port to these. So this way, one instrument could be playing 3 different string tracks. All right, Keely's asks, is it possible when I solo a track and it's in a group, when I release it, this specific group remains in solo? Let's take a look. Okay, so I'm gonna take all my drums here and let's add them to a group channel. Okay. Okay, so it says when I solo track and it's in a group track when I release this. Okay, is it possible when I solo a track and it's in a group from when I release it, the specific group remains in solo? All right, so let's say I take my snare. So since that is, so I think if this isn't soloed, since we didn't solo the group, so if we solo the group, because it's just doing the audio path. So, so because the group itself was never soloed, the track which is going through the group is soloed, so that's why the group will not remain soloed, because again, it's just allowing you, when you solo it, if it's going through a audio path in different buses, then that will be carried over, but you didn't actually solo the group. All right, so we have a question. It says, are there any stock tools in Cubase to align vocals with instrumentals, like Vocal Align? So yeah, you could use audio alignment. So let me just, I think I have an example here I could show you. All right, so let's say we have our vocal files like this, and we listen to it. Sorry. So if I wanted to align the background vocals, I could say, okay, I want this as my reference. And once we come over here, so if we go to, I think it's under, let me just, but you'll see kind of the toolbar over here. So let's just take, all right, so you see this little icon here. So I'm going to select a track that I want as the basis, and this doesn't have to be all audio. Then we'll click on Align. I'm going to add this alignment reference. So I'm going to come over here, click on plus. I'm going to take these tracks, and these are my targets. So I could do multiple tracks at once. And then I'll just choose to align audio. And now we listen to it. You can see visually. So if we undid that originally, and then if we redo, you can listen how much tighter it is. So again, you could just activate that by coming right here. You'll see the audio alignment, and I think it's also, you can get it from the open audio alignment panel from the audio menu as well. All right, so we see from Chilluminate, says I guess, good morning, Greg. When I plug in my MIDI controllers, I see them in the MIDI port setup, but not in the MIDI remote. How to set up 16 drum pads, Akai, MPC, and keyboards. Keys, what is the function to map to? So just because you plug in your controller, you know, if it's not set up with a driver already, we could at this point come over and just, you know, when we are looking at it, we could just click on plus, and then you could come over here and define a particular controller. So let me show you how we could get one started. So I'll do this from scratch. Okay, so we'll say add a vendor, and if you could just all right, and we choose where the MIDI input and output port is going. All right, so we could say create a MIDI controller surface. So if you wanted to use like drum pads, you could just, you know, like let's say my controller now has faders. You could use trigger pads. You could, and all you'd have to do is at this point, I'll say, okay, I want this to be like a fader. So I'm going to select a fader. What the concept is, we could take and mimic the buttons that are on your controller and have those. So now I'm just going to touch the fader, and now I don't have to add any more. As I touch a fader, it's going to automatically add an increment my various devices. So now that we have kind of like a physical layout of your controller, at this point we could say let's open up the mapping assistant, and I could just say let's make these into focus quick controls or whatever function that we want. So I move the fader, assign the function, and this could be probably like 3,000 different functions in the program. So if you wanted that to be, you know, pads, you could just come over here and assign trigger pads, pitch bend wheel, you have modulation. And if you wanted to use your keys to do different functions, you could just have it as a button and then have those keys do different functions. But you basically, so it's going to be recognized by the operating system, but not every controller company has created their remote control scripts yet. So with that, you can now come over here and just, when we go to our remote controls, we can now see our control surface there. So you probably will have to make it, you know, so it's not bad to do it all. All right, so we have Tiago checking in from Canoas, Brazil. Thanks for joining us. Great to see you on. All right, so we see from Chiluminate which MIDI remote controller is supported by Cubase without having to set up. So, you know, if you kind of look at the list here, you know, there's a number of different controllers. So different Akai, Arturia, Novation. But there's also a collection of different controller scripts that people have made and are sharing on the Steinberg.net forums. You could look there. Okay, so you see Michael Pierce. Okay, he's answering a question. All right, so we see question, are the current instruments in Cubase all from Steinberg, or is there a risk of not being able to use them in the future like Prologue? So currently all of the included instruments with Cubase are developed in-house, so we won't run into any licensing issues. But I think Prologue may have been done in-house as well, and that kind of morphed and evolved into Retrolog. All right, wonderful to see Razel from Denmark. Thanks for joining us today. Great to see Val checking in from Vienna. All right, you see David Smith saying hi. David King from Sydney, Australia, one of my favorite cities I've ever visited. Thanks for joining us in the middle of the night. All right, so we see Fly V. Hey there, Greg and everyone from Cubase. I'm Vince from Canada. My major question would be, what's the best way to keep a track in tempo and in the same key throughout creating it with samples and MIDI? All right, so we'll just do a new project here. Okay, so we kind of saw the musical mode before, but one of the things we could also do is set a, you'll see if you go to the top here and you right click, there's a function called project root key. So we're going to turn this on, and let's say I want my project root key to be D. All right, so we will come over to media, and let's start with just some different loops. Okay, so I'm going to drop this in. So that's, and again, if we have this on, I have this button turned on, we drop it in, it's going to automatically kind of place it into musical mode for us. All right, so let's say we want this as a variation here, so I'm going to do this like 3 times. We'll have this loop 3 times. So let's say we have this going on. So let's say now I want to find maybe a bass. So I can say, oh, maybe I want this to be in, let's find in our bass. All right, so I'm gonna make a copy of this. So let's say now I want this to be in the key of E. You'll hear the bass change, the tonality. But if I want it to be in D, I'll come over here. Let's say we want to do maybe synth comp. So now we could just kind of, let's bring in like a MIDI track. So we could have MIDI loops as well. And I could just kind of drag . And because we have this set to kind of a common root key and tempo, so if I change my tempo now to slow it down. Now let's say at this point, if I wanted to modulate from D to E, all I'd have to do is we could add a transpose track. So I can say right here at this point, we're currently in the key of D, and I want this to modulate up a whole step. So we're going to be in D here. Now, as we do this, all of the different MIDI instruments, because we've set the project root key accordingly. And then we're going to, when we get to the B section, we're going to modulate from D to E. So use the project root key and then make sure you have everything in musical mode, and then it will just kind of automatically fit together. Okay, wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Glad you can make it. All right, so we see from DL White, says Greg, hi-hat chilling last week. I was using a stock drum loop as a basis for a beat. There are foot commands and MIDI CC4 from the original, thanks. Yeah, so usually CC4 is a CC that's going to be used to open up hi-hats on some different electronic drum kits. All right, so you see from Tiago, it says feature request Cubase IC Pro for Android to be able to zoom vertically. Also, I'm not able to add audio track and click in the options and add window on my PC with IC Pro connected. Okay, I don't have, my phone isn't in the room with me to check, but I'll play with it and pass it along if it's not working as I expect. But I should be able to have it for Tuesday. All right, you see Peter Bata says greetings one and all. Thanks for joining us. All right, we see Michael Teams has begun with the virtual ice cream distribution. We see Pertti Komenen from Finland. All right, so we see from 808 King says, hi G, in some DAWs there's a way to split audio chain into 2 or more frequency outputs for routing for para processing. Is there a way other than sends to make use of creative routing for frequency parameter paracom? So I think you would, how you could do it in Cubase, and let's see, I think I have this file kind of set up for this. So let's take a look. So if you want to do processing, so I would, route it to different groups. So let's say we have like a bass part here. So we'll just listen to our bass. So let's say this is our So I've created 3 different groups, and each of the groups I put an imager plugin, and then I just soloed the frequency range, and then I put a plugin after the fact. So let's say on the low frequencies, I want to have a flanger. On my mid frequencies, we turn this on, I wanted to have a distortion on the mid range. And let's say on my upper end frequencies, so I just use the imager plugin. I don't make any settings changes, but I just solo a particular range, and that will split the frequency range. And here I want a mono delay. So as we listen to our bass going through our different frequencies, we can now come over. So now we could say, okay, we want just the low end. Sorry, let me just. So the low end is going to go through the flanger. So, and if I wanted to come over here, we could just solo that frequency range. So when it's not soloed, the flanger's on all the frequencies. So now we could have just distortion on the mid-range. And I want just a delay on the high frequencies. So instead of delay on just every frequency. So it may not be as, so if you send it to different groups, you could then run something like the Imager plugin just to isolate particular frequencies and then do your processing on it pretty easily. So let me know if that's helpful for you, 808 King. All right, so we see from FlyV says, I'm not able to add chords being used into the chord track like you. All right, so let's say if we come over here, let's add a quick chord track. All right, so now when I double click, I could just define the chords like this. We could go to different chord assistant. If we click on plus, we could just go to the next bar, add the next chord like so. If we have it on, if we have a chord track or chord pads, we can drag those up from the chord pads as well. So let me know if I did anything that you're not able to do, or if that makes sense. All right, so we see Terry Dean just says, I've just ordered Icon Platform M+. Let me know how you like it. All right, so we see from Martin, says, I meant not selecting playing the two instruments in parallel, but each behind the other by selecting one of the two ones. So I'm not sure if you want, and this is with the chord tracks that we were doing earlier. So we had the chord track playing back through the Rhodes and the pad shop. So I'm not sure if, Martin, maybe if you could specify if you wanted the chords not to play on this, like what you want on the second one. But each, so I'm not sure what means. Okay, so evidently I did it in parallel, but you want each behind the other by selecting one of the two ones. So maybe if you could clarify a little more so I could understand better. Sorry if I'm being dense. All right, so 808 King says G and Groove Agent with some drum kits, you can hit one key and it'll play a beat with many sounds. I know about consolidating tracks, but this is only one MIDI event. How to separate the sounds out. Okay, so let's come here. So we have our Urban Ballads kit here. Open this up. All right, so we have a pattern pad. All right, so I'm going to drag that to the project window. And now if I wanted to take these sounds, if I wanted to split out their audio outputs, what we could do is let's come over here to our mix console. So let's say if we're if I wanted these to be split out to separate outputs in my mixer, I could say, okay, let's take our kick and we're going to send it to output 2. All right, so we can now come over here and say, okay, my snare is going to output 3, This kick is going to output 2. Hi-hat is going out to output 4. So now as we play this particular sound, these are being split out to different channels. So if you wanted that, another way of kind of accomplishing, if you, now we look at this, if we wanted this all to be on separate tracks for our kick snare, so you know, I prefer to do all my editing kind of like this, but if we wanted to do different tracks, if we now go to your MIDI menu and choose dissolve part, then we could choose to separate by pitches. And now we would have our kick, snare, hi-hat, everything kind of broken down into individual tracks with individual instruments as well. So once again, select the particular event, go to MIDI, and choose dissolve part. Oh, you see Michael Pierce going to IMSTA tomorrow in London. I wish I could be there. See, Martin's just mentioning you could enable GPU processing with Spectral Layers. So he's a good point. I just have a very simple video card without a GPU on my Windows machine. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped. So we see from Daniel, will there be any sales at Cubase 13 by the end of the year? I'm saving up and I wouldn't want to buy full price today, and there's like 50% off tomorrow. So generally there is a summer sale. You know, I don't know when it will be, but you know, generally there is a summer sale. So but I don't know when. And usually I can't share until there's a promotion going on, but there was a Cubase promotion that just happened in April, so just last month. All right, so we see from 808 King, Greg, can you show a few hacks for using Cubase with ARA WaveLab? I know WaveLab just came out with some new editing tricks. Thank you, bro. All right, so let's say I want to, we'll do a new project here. All right, so now one of the great things that we could do is, WaveLab is ARA, so there's some like really kind of nifty things that we could do with that. So I'm going to select a track, and when we go to our extensions, we're going to choose WaveLab ARA. So now we'll just take this whole track, and at this point we can now basically do our editing inside of our WaveLab environment. So, one of the great things is also being able to see kind of particular frequencies. So we can see kind of not only our typical waveform, but you could actually see different rainbow frequencies. So if you think you have sibilants, those could often be kind of bright yellow. But now we could kind of have our typical WaveLab editing environment. So if I just say, okay, let's do a fade in at the beginning. I want to come here and just process this particular file. I could come over and, if this channel was louder or softer, one of the things that we could do is when we go to our process, you could check out the panning. And you could also just, as we come over here, you could level kind of the panning between the two different channels. So if you wanted to, you know, come over here, adjust the envelope, remove DC offset, different panning functions. So if you wanted to drop markers in, and something that's also really handy is, let's say as we're playing this file, just kind of tuck it back in here. So I'll just take this off, and let's say I want to do something, you know, because a lot of times when we deal with stuff in Cubase, we could have like left and right. But here I could say, let's do mid and side. So I could say I want to take I'll take the, you know, so right now we're looking at, instead of the left and right channels, are mid and side. So I could take this particular channel and say, okay, I want this to be louder. So I'm going to go to my process here, and let's go to gain. So if I want my mix to sound wider, I could take the sides. So we think of the sides as like the left and right panning spectrum. And I could take the sides here and apply this. So as we listen to it, we could just say, okay, now the mix will be wider. So if we take this and, you know, so we could do different processing for mid-side processing, which is like really helpful for a lot of different processes. So those are some of the cool things that, you know, so you could, you know, in a stereo file, do particular editing. You could do some spectral editing here as well as overall loudness. So if you want to see what your global analysis of your file is, you could just do an analysis here within WaveLab, automatically look for peaks, what your loudness is in RMS or EBU, R128 with pitch, if you need DC offset, error detection and correction as well. So a lot of great things you can do in WaveLab when running as ARA. All right, I'm just going to copy my, I'm sorry, I'm just going to post the Zoom link one more time with the password. Sorry about that. Thank you, Michael Teams. Let me just get that copied over. Okay, so it should have the passcode and the meeting number. Sorry for confusion. All right. All right, so we have a question from Anders McCormack. Hi, Greg. When I record for my piano VST, if I need to cut a section or move a part slightly, I can never seem to get the piano expression to move with it precisely. How would you cut or move MIDI so that the pedal moves accordingly? All right, let me find something with some piano. Okay, so we listen to this. All right, so I think what you want to do is to just come over here and you'll see this auto select controllers. Make sure that that is turned on. And then as we come over here, let's say we move notes, that will move, as we move the notes, that will move the controllers as well. So if I want to take like these particular notes here and I move these notes over, we can see that the MIDI CC pedal is automatically moved with the notes. So check to make sure that this icon, which is in the editor, which is the auto select controllers, is enabled and turned on. All right, so we see from Got Yours, says last year we talked about Groove Agent exporting kits with samples and reloading a kit into another new song. It stopped working for me in 13 Pro PC. You're having some issues. So yeah, let me take a quick look, see if I can get this figured out. I know we ran out of time last Friday. Okay. And here's our preset that we made last week. So let's see if we could just do this. Okay, so I'm going to click on Export Files here. Okay. Okay, so let's come over. Okay, so we have our samples right there. All right, let me just see if it's under user presets here. So this is the kit from last time, so I may have to refresh, But we come here, this is the kit that we created last time. Let me go to my MediaBay and see if I need to refresh that. So we'll go to user presets. So it may not, I may have to scan. Let me just go to my desktop and scan the folder. But there's all the samples, and let me just go back to the other project here. So again, I would just do export kit with samples. So when we do that, we can see that on the desktop, that we see here's our preset here. So let me just go back to the other file. Let's get to our export audio mixed. Sorry. So I'm going to cut the kit here, activate this. Let me cut the kit. All right, so we see that's going to be saved at kind of the same level. So we see here's our May 24th. This is our percussion kit that we just made. Let me just rescan the disk here. So that's the one we made on last Friday. Here's our May 31st, 2024. So once we rescan the desktop here, you can see that that's our May 31st, 2024. That's the kit that we just made. So if I want to so you could just see that's going to be created right there. So when you go to export the kit, and you may have to save it in the default so I just saved it to the particular I didn't choose the default path, but as we would come over here, let's go to, let's say, our file browser, and we'll choose desktop, and we'll come here to, so we can see the samples are there. So I didn't save it in the default kind of user location, but you can see that it will just kind of show up there, so it may take a while for MediaBay to populate it. But when you go to export, kit with samples, make sure that you have export files checked there. See, Terry Dean says just bought MIDI Quest 13 and has his Chord Triton rack integrated as a VST. All right, so we see from Chilluminate says looking for suggestions to integrate Cubase with external sound module using only CV input. Example, play MIDI kick, snare, cymbals, and send 3 separate CV out. So I think that there are like USB to CV out devices. I haven't really gone down the CV path, but I think that there are devices that will basically send the MIDI out as CV. Maybe if someone else has experience, they could chime in. All right, wonderful to see the artist known as Love and Matt Elston on. See, Tiago wants improvements in the audio alignment tools. Is not precise for longer melodic lines. So sometimes you may have to kind of just cut into different sections for it to be more accurate. So try, cutting into smaller sections and then using the alignment on the smaller sections. All right, wonderful to see Brian Sawyer who's bush hogging howdies from Beulahville, North Carolina. All right, so we see Soren just says there's a lot of shortcuts I don't have a grip on in WaveLab 12 in Cubase. Click on an event, hit P to select loop locators on the event. I want that for a clip and a montage in WaveLab. All right, so let's take a quick look. See if we can figure it out for you. Okay, let me move my monitoring computer here. All right, so let's look in the keyboard shortcuts. All right, so it looks like Q, then maybe Shift plus L. So let's take a look. So I have this selected. So it looks like if you come here, hit Q plus, looks like Shift L, that will do it. So give that a try. So when you go here, and again, if we go to the preferences, shortcuts, so try just, or loop selection, let's try Shift plus F6. So it looks like that will automatically. So you could try that, but you know, look under preferences, shortcuts, and you should be able to find those. Okay, reading the comments. All right, you see Daniela just says, every live stream suggests the unofficial Cubase Discord. Can you give an example that you recommend? So there's lots of great, it's a great compendium, like a collection of different tutorials that most people find really beneficial. All right, so we see, sorry if I missed the question earlier, Val, how to clean up an audio clip, declick, deplosive, denoise in Cubase Pro 13 with built-in plugins. So there aren't any specific like restoration plugins that come with Cubase. If you have, you know, some of the functions, you know, Nuendo will have some of the functions, but if we have an audio file that you needed to manually like take a click out of, you know, one of the things that you could do like if you zoom in far enough, you could then grab the pencil tool and draw in or out pops and clicks, but there aren't any like restoration plugins that come standard with Cubase. They do come standard in WaveLab. See, Terry Dean just says he's using MIDI Quest to support a lot of hardware devices, converts them into VSTs. So I had an early version that never quite worked for me. All right, so Terry Dean has feature request search option inside the Steinberg download assistant and also an uninstall / repair function. All right, I'll pass that along. But usually, like with the Steinberg download assistant, once you enter your download access code, then your particular instrument shows up, you know, your product, your, you know, Cubase version, WaveLab, Nuendo instruments will show up under My Products. So, you know, so that can negate the need for a search engine, for a search function. All right, DL White says, hi Greg, I'm using Groove Agent SE5 Tastes Like Gold kit. The kick note C1 are playing a snare using GM map. The agent window plays correct sound, but the drum editor plays the wrong sound. So you probably don't want to use the GM map, but let's take a look. So I'm going to add an instrument track. Okay, so we have this, and once you have a Groove Agent track, you know, instead of using the GM, you know, the GM map, which may not, you know, align because this isn't a general MIDI kit, just choose Create Drum Map from Instrument. So now, once we've done that, that will automatically extract the names from the instrument. So when we play C1, this will work as expected. So that's my C1. If I want to come over here quickly to just a MIDI insert, so again, once you have the Groove Agent kit, come here, and in the drum map, what you want to do is just create drum map from the instrument instead of using the general MIDI map. But so try that. All right. All right, so we see Pawan Kumar says in MediaBay, if you add a folder to your favorites and have subfolders in that, they're not showing up in alphabetical order. Is there a way to arrange the folders alphabetically rather than having them random? All right, let's take a quick look. So I'm going to create some folders on my desktop here. I'm just going to change it here so that they're not being alphabetical and in the same order. All right, so we have this. So let's go to my MediaBay here. And come here to File Browser. Okay, so now I'm going to go to Favorites, and we'll say MediaBay Favorites. And let's just see if any of the other ones I have, since they're empty. So it looks like it does everything. So it doesn't look like it looks at the subfolders, but I could play around with it some more. But it looks like it just shows the contents within that. All right, so Forward Thinking asks, hi Greg, can you please explain what musical mode is in Cubase and why and when would you want that be useful to activate? All right, so let's say we have a project here. And what musical mode will do is if we have a project, and we want, so let's say our tempo here is going to be 100 beats a minute. So I want to start working with drum loops. So now when I know that I want my tempo to be 100 beats a minute, when it's set to musical mode, it's going to play back in sync with the project tempo. So if we listen to this now, it's not in sync with the tempo. So once something is in musical mode, it looks at its tempo, and then it'll make that it'll make the audio file stretch so that it plays in tempo with the song. So now if I say, oh, I want this to be faster, like let's say I want this to be 128, I could now just say, okay, change this, and instead of having to re-record the audio, this audio, since it's in musical mode, will just play to match the current tempo. And that's what musical mode will allow you to do. All right, I know we have a lot of, I'm going to post the Zoom meetup. Sorry if I didn't get the password in earlier. And I know we had a bunch of questions that were sent in, so let me jump to some of those, and we'll be migrating to the Zoom in about 24 minutes. All right, so first question we have is, can you discuss the differences between linear and musical time-based modes on tracks? Okay, so let's take a look at an example. All right, so just like we had musical mode will take an audio event and have that automatically follow the tempo. It will be kind of like a tempo parasite, if you will. So let's come over here and say we have a video track. And as we are playing with this video track, we're going to come, let's say we're scoring to video. We'll come listen to this. All right, so let's say I want to change the tempo of a particular track. All right, so I want to, but let's say this symbol is coming in directly when like that cloud comes in. So I want to change the tempo of this. So let's say, and we could switch between musical and linear mode by clicking here. So when you see musical mode, that the timing is going to be based on the particular track, based on tempo. So let's say I change my tempo from 119 and we slow it down to 93 beats a minute. So we listen to this. All right, so where I had that cloud come in and I wanted this particular cymbal sound to come in like right where that cloud was, when I slowed down the tempo, what it did was it changed the position of that. So I'm gonna go back to my original tempo and we'll say 119. So we listen to this particular track and I want this particular sound to come in exactly when that cloud does. Right there. So as we do this, what I want to do now is, but I want to change the tempo of this. I'm going to place this into linear mode. So this track, when I change it to tempo, this is going to stay at its actual time position. So I'm going to change the tempo from 119 down. So now the song, the music is going to be slower. Just take the cycle off, sorry. So I could change the tempo of the song, but as I change tempos, if the track is in linear time base, then that track is going to stay at the same exact time. If it's in musical time base, that will it will speed up and slow down based upon the project tempo. So if you want something to always be at a specific point in time, put it into linear time base. Musical time base if you want it to follow and change with musical tempo changes. All right, question. Hi, Greg. Can you show how to add a new guitar VST to Cubase 13 Pro and how to access it once it's installed? Thank you for your efforts. Okay, so come over here. Let's say I just have a guitar instrument loaded up. I have T guitar, so I could come over here. I could play a chord. So when I go to load up an instrument, we could just come over here. I have T guitar. And at that point, we could just load it up. There's also one that comes with Cubase 13 called Tails, which is kind of a really interesting. So we could just say, okay, I want to come over here. So you could have different guitar instruments here. So Tails comes with it, and you could kind of blend textures with guitars and add effects, and you could choose different textures here. And find the balance between. So you could just kind of load them up inside of HALion Sonic quite easily. All right, so we have a question. Hey, is there a way to quickly extract all the HALion instruments, let's say 10 instruments, to Nuendo channels like you can extract to mixer function in Cubase in Groove Agent Pro? So there, Groove Agent will have kind of a copy all of the mixer settings to the Cubase engine. There isn't an equivalent function inside of HALion, but if we have your different instruments loaded up here and we go to mix, we could choose up to 16 stereo outputs in HALion Sonic, and I think you have 32 stereo outs and a 5.1 output inside of the full HALion. So here you could route it out, but if we had all the effects kind of set up here, that wouldn't translate over directly like we can with Groove Agent. All right, so we see, hi Greg, I want to check see if there's any progress in resolving the issue with the Alt-click command and cutting through all the audio clips take stacked on an individual track. So, I think that this has always worked the same way. So this question is like, if I have two events that are stacked on top of each other, and if I split the event, that splits all underlying events as well. But if I come here, and I've never had a problem with this particular feature, but if we go to your edit menu to functions, here we could choose to split at cursor. So we could just say, I think it's going to be, so we will choose this split at cursor. So function split at cursor, and there's keyboard shortcut for that. That as we do that, that just cuts the top layer. So we can see the bottom layers are completely underneath. So if I come here, we do a split. We'll do it in the middle of the first measure. So we have 3 layers stacked. That once we come here to functions, split at cursor. And again, I could split the top layer, the bottom layer, the secondary layer wasn't split, and the bottom layer wasn't split. All right, so we had some other questions. Says, okay, it says auto fades is a great Cubase feature. What could possibly be the reason of not making them visible though? All right, so when we have fades, we have auto fades, and what an auto fade will allow you to do is anytime that you make a cut in your audio section, and if you weren't careful and you couldn't avoid doing a cut at a non-zero crossing event, we have the auto fade setting. So we come here, and as we do this, we could just say, you know, we will come to, just select this particular track. So, and we come here to the auto fade settings. So the concept is it just does it in the background so you don't have to think or worry about it. So it's not intended to be edited. So this is often to prevent playback problems when you're doing editing so that you don't have to apply a fade every single time. So since it's not actually being written into the file, it's just doing it on playback. That's why it's not visible. So it's more, the intention is kind of more of a particular, you know, way of not having to go through every single, you know, see every single fade for every time a potential, for every edit that could cause a click or pop. You may not want to see a fade for every single edit. So that's why the the auto fades just do it in real time so you don't have to worry about it. And if you wanted to adjust the fades, you know, you could always select multiple events and just, you know, do your fades across multiple events, just like so, if you wanted to. All right, another question. In a mixer, if you have a big project, say you can't see all the tracks in Mixer without scrolling, I wanted to copy a plugin with all of its settings and paste it to another track outside the current Mixer view. So what's the best way of doing that? All right, so let's say we have our mix console here. I'll switch. So let's say I have these effects. All right, and let's say I wanted to copy this track to a track that's over all of my inserts. So I would just right click and I would just choose copy. So let's say we scroll all the way here and then click on the inserts, right click on the inserts and paste. And all of your plugins with all their settings are immediately carried over. So if you wanted to copy just this particular setting, I think that we can just come here and you could do individual plugin settings as well, but just try selecting copy. Once you click on the inserts, click on the inserts again. Sorry. Keep hitting the wrong thing. And then just paste. So once we have, I'll copy, slide over, right click, paste. All right, so we just see how to go from like a 44.1K project to a 96K project. So if we want to do that, kind of the easiest way, I'll just open up a particular project. All right, and as we come over here, let's say our project sample rate is at 44.1. So now what we will, if we wanted to come here, we could just say, we go to our project sample rate, we could just choose to 96K. So let's say we want to do that, and it says convert audio files to new rate. We'll say yes. Do you want to keep the source files in the pool? We'll keep them. Do you want to keep the audio events at their sample positions? Choose no. And now your project would be playing the same and just at a different, higher sample rate. All right, another question. On a Windows 10 system, if you have several saved versions of projects that you don't need, let's say you have 40 saved versions, is it safe to delete some of those folders without risking anything to the other project versions before or after if you want to delete versions 10 through 30, for example? So as long as they're kind of saved as independent projects, you should be able to delete, you know, the projects in between. So without any consequences. All right, question: when bouncing audio tracks, it'd be really nice to have the added option of bounce to a new track. Currently, the only option is to replace. So if you need it to do that, what you can do is just choose to do a render in place instead of a bounce selection. So let's say if I'm here and I want to save this to a new track, I could select this event instead of doing, and let's say if I had different edits applied to it, and as I come here, if I wanted to do this, we could just go to your file and we could choose render in place. We can go to our render settings. I could do it as one event, as separate events, and at this point it's going to create a new track and automatically have those files created. So we'll come here, edit to render in place, and then that will just move them to a new track for you. So use render in place instead of bounce selection. All right, so a question: it would be good to have some sort of indication when Cubase is thinking / working on with specific processes. I'm thinking hourglass or an empty bar that fills up during processes, but anything that's clearly visible would work. What I mean is, for example, if you import tracks from our project, loading up an instrument and contact and so on, any process that could take a while to complete. So sometimes, you know, there's may not be information coming from contact to Cubase of how long it's taking or what that's doing. So you'd have to maybe look within the sampler, within the instrument, and how that instrument is loading up their content. So that could be a little out of our realm to get that. All right, so it says a question: I often use clip gain to quickly match levels of tracks right from the project window. The problem with this in Cubase is that when you select an event or several events, they are enlarged. This problem can be avoided if it's a single event by not selecting the event and go right on the clip gain. Is there a preference to not enlarge selected events? So it's going to be in the edit menu. You'll see enlarge selected track. So now if I come here, we could just enlarge the selected track. So make sure that you could have it where it's automatically, if you do a event selection, there's a preference where selecting the event will automatically select the track. Track selection follows event selection. So if I have that preference under editing selected, that if I come here, that selecting event will automatically enlarge. So it could be a combination of having enlarged selected track as well as preferences for editing, and track selection follows event selection. All right, so we have minor thing, but it'd be improvement if we could see the size value of fades as you hover over them. As it is now, all you see is the arrow to change the size. I'm not sure, but you currently have to click on the fades to see the size. There's also might be a risk of changing it when you just want to see what size it is. All right, so if we have a fade, so let's say I have fade ins and fade outs on this particular event. So as we go to this event, you could actually see directly in the info line how long the fade is and how long the fade out is. So you can see that, and if we have our master time set to seconds, we can say, okay, this is going to be 8 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 129 milliseconds for my fade in, my fade out, etc. So you could, as soon as you click, you could see what the fade in and fade out values are right here in the info line. All right, question. When you disable / enable tracks, mute, unmute should be automatically applied as it is now. If you disable a bunch of tracks in the project window, all the events will still look the same as the active tracks, except the track windows to the left of the events is grayed out. It would be much easier to see if all the events and parts were also automatically muted when disabling or unmuting. So I think that if a track that has muted and unmuted events, if we wanted to come here, so let's say we disable this track, I think disabling the track shouldn't affect the mute and unmute of particular tracks. So I think that should be a completely independent thing. So I would, I know that it looks like maybe it's active, but obviously you're not hearing it. You can see that it's deactivated here, but I think that that should be two separate events, so I think that makes total sense, the current design intention. So I don't think that you should mute events when they're disabled. Maybe you could have you could set up a project logical editor to hide disabled tracks if you don't want to see them. So, but I think that it shouldn't change the mute status of events on a track because a track is disabled. All right, so we have a question. When I want to export several MIDI events, example, on different tracks in different position, I go to export selected events function and export them. But when I then play back the audio file, they're all empty and no sound is in the audio file. So if we're exporting MIDI events, so let's say if we're here, and we copy this, and all right, so when we do this, we can export the events. All right, and so we have to realize that MIDI doesn't have a sound necessarily. So if it's a MIDI track, we could export the events. So we'll just come over here, say export selected events. But when we do this, we're not necessarily, so let's say we're going to export these. We'll say, okay, we're going to do them dry. And let's put these on our desktop. So, so it could be if it's a MIDI track, it could export the MIDI, but it may not render it. If it's an instrument track, it should be rendered. So let's go ahead and import audio files, and we'll come to our desktop. So, but generally most people are going to do exporting of events for audio. So if you're doing for MIDI, it may not carry over the audio sound. All right. So I had a question about focus quick controls and MIDI remote. When I have a plugin window with focus control editors, I can also open up found in the functions menu the remote control editor. The editor has several pages, for example, 4 pages of 8 controls each. The first page of the remote control editor reflects the same 8 parameters which are shown in the quick controls display. My question is it possible somehow to switch the quick control parameters of the second page of the remote control parameters? So if we have a plugin that has multiple parameters, let's say like a multi-band compressor, and we go to our settings here, we can say we go to, we'll come here to the remote control editor. So we can see that there's going to be more than 8 parameters. So we have 8 parameters per page here. So if we wanted to switch from this parameter to bank to this parameter bank to this parameter bank, we could do this in the MIDI remote by coming over here. Let's close this. And the function that you want to do is come over here to select a track, and then you want to say like insert and strip effects. We'll say insert viewers, and let's go to parameters. So we want to set 8 here for 8 parameters. And under actions, we can see we want to go to the next plugin parameter bank, which would go from the top 8 to the second 8, or we could go to the previous plugin parameter bank. So once again, under selected track, insert and strip effects, we want to go to insert to viewer to parameters. We want to make sure this has the number of controls in setup, and under actions, you'll see next plugin parameter bank and previous plugin parameter bank. So we could assign those to 2 functions, and that would allow you to switch between multiple parameter banks with your MIDI remote. All right, so let me jump back. I think we're just about ready to migrate over to Zoom. So let me paste the link one more time. Thank you for all the wonderful questions. All right, and I'm gonna go ahead and start Zoom up here. Get the meeting started. Sorry that I didn't have the password in the first couple of pastings of that. But if you want to look at the meeting invitation, so meeting ID, and this is obviously live. So if you're watching this afterward, but it's 859-2711-2246 and the passcode 147420. So this is going on at 3:02 p.m. Eastern Time on May 31st. So I'll go ahead and start. All right, so we see Tim Weinheimer, John Costigan from Kenosha, we have Jan, all right, great to see Nick. Good. Paste one more time. Hey. All right, we see Sable joining us. All right, we're giving our minute or two in the live stream before we wrap up there. Hey, Marcos, how are you? Yeah. Hey, how's it going? All right, we see. All right, we're giving our minute or so before I wrap up the live stream. I'm going to turn my light on so I don't look like I'm sunburned as much.